This plane is older than your grandparents' TV, and the US Air Force is about to strap hypersonic missiles to it. The same bomber that first flew in the Vietnam War is being revived for the next one. But why? This is how a 1950s bomber just became a hypersonic arsenal ship. The B-52 Stratofortress is the kind of aircraft that sounds made up when you describe it, not because it's futuristic, because it's the exact opposite. It's massive, loud, and looks like it belongs behind velvet ropes in a museum. Step into the cockpit and you feel it immediately. This thing first flew in 1952. So why is it still here? Most aircraft get their era, then a newer design replaces them, and they fade into history. The B-52 didn't. It kept getting called back for new wars and new jobs, even though nobody expected the airframe to last this long. An old Cold War bomber being rebuilt into a modern missile platform that can strike from far away. But how does that evolution even begin? How do you go from nuclear bomber to hypersonic carrier? You have to rewind to the thinking that built America's heavy bombers in the first place. In the 1930s, the B-17 Flying Fortress proved you could send bomber formations deep into enemy territory and still bring them home. Then, World War II ended and everything changed overnight. Nuclear weapons were real, and the US needed global reach. That's where the B-29 comes in. It pushed bomber design forward with features like pressurized crew spaces and remote gun systems, and it gave Boeing the foundation to go bigger. So when the military launched a post-war competition for a new long-range strategic bomber, Boeing took an early swing, straight wings, turboprop power. Then, the project nearly collapsed. Requirements kept shifting, designs kept getting rewritten, and engineers even explored radical shapes like flying wings. By late 1947, it was close to being scrapped, after millions had already been spent. And then came the moment that saved it. Boeing was told to come back with something that worked. Fast. Two things finally made the answer possible. Turbojet engines were getting strong enough, and in-flight refueling was becoming practical. So on Monday, Boeing returned with the version that clicked, an all-jet bomber with 8 engines and 4 pods, built around one simple advantage: refuel in the sky, and you can stay up long enough to reach anywhere. When the Air Force gave the green light, the B-52 entered service in 1955 as a nuclear bomber. They built hundreds before the line shut down in the early 1960s. The one still flying today is the H model, and that's the part that should make you stop. Why is a bomber this old still in the conversation at all? Because the B-52 was never built like a one-era aircraft. It was built like a foundation you could keep building on. Look at how it's put together. Those long, flexible wings were designed to take years of stress without giving up. And the way it moves tells you everything. This isn't a fighter that snaps into the sky. It rolls, gathers speed, and uses sheer wing and power to lift a massive body off the runway, steady, almost unbothered. The landing gear is the same story. A bicycle-style setup front and rear, with small outrigger wheels near the wingtips to keep those long wings from kissing the ground. The gear even folds inward in opposite directions just to fit. And then there's the trick that feels like it shouldn't be possible. The crab landing, where the gear can angle so the bomber can touch down cleanly in a crosswind. Now here's the real test. What does the inside feel like? You don't step into a B-52 the way you do a modern jet. You come up through a hatch underneath, squeeze through tight passages past equipment, and suddenly you're in a space designed for long missions and strict routine. The lower deck used to revolve around navigation and radar work. People focused on finding targets and guiding the mission. Up top, it's got a classic bomber layout: captain left, co-pilot right, and a cockpit that looks busy because it has to be. Even the 8 throttle levers tell you what era this thing comes from, back when crews managed engines hands-on instead of letting software do the thinking. And because missions can stretch on, the aircraft has the bare necessities: bunks, simple food storage, and a basic bathroom. Setup. But don't confuse "has it" with "feels good." The air's dry, the noise is constant, temperatures swing, and once you push into day-long sorties, fatigue stops being a feeling and starts being a problem. Which raises an important question: how do you keep a machine like this safe? You do it by flying it like a team sport. In a buff, coordination isn't a skill, it's the whole job. So why didn't it get replaced like everything else? It comes down to three things. First, the airframe had enough spare capacity to accept upgrades without the jet losing its usefulness. Second, modernization never stopped. New wiring, new systems, new capabilities, layered in over decades instead of one big overhaul. Third, the crew structure could evolve with the mission, because this aircraft has always been more than pilot and plane. Even the escape setup shows the age and the practicality. Some seats eject downward, others upward through panels that blow away first. Not pretty, just functional. And early on, the mission it was built for was pure Cold War pressure, deterrence. The U.S. flew airborne nuclear patrols, B-52s carrying thermonuclear weapons, staying aloft so retaliation was always possible. That was stressful, and it was dangerous. Accidents happened, including a 1968 crash in Greenland that scattered radioactive debris and helped shut down that constant airborne era. But the bigger takeaway is simple. The B-52 was trusted for the most sensitive mission on Earth because it could stay available when it mattered. In-flight refueling turned that into global reach, and crews proved it with massive long-distance flights. And that ability to stay up didn't just matter for dropping weapons. It mattered for everything that came before the strike too, staying on station, watching wide areas, being present when the moment shifts. So when the world changes fast, what's more valuable? A platform that has to rush in and rush out, or one that can already be there, waiting? That's the logic the buff was built on. Vietnam is the moment the B-52's job description changed. It stops being a one-purpose nuclear threat and turns into a workhorse for conventional war, strike after strike, night after night. Crews even took it down low at times, trying to stay harder to track, all while hauling a ridiculous amount of steel. That's where the buff gets its blunt force upgrade, big belly. It pushes the load to about 60,000 pounds, and now the aircraft isn't just big, it's overwhelming. In Southeast Asia, that translated into long missions, heavy releases, and a tempo so steady that some crews started painting bomb tallies on the nose, not as decoration, more like proof that this thing was being used like a daily tool. December 1972 is when the story stops being theoretical. Vietnam tightens, the clock speeds up, and the B-52 gets pulled into Operation Linebacker 2, a hard, compressed run where the missions stack up fast, the tonnage is massive, and the losses are real. The nickname that sticks, Christmas bombings, isn't something you earn in a quiet war. It comes from a campaign where the buff takes punishment, gets written off, and still rolls back out again the next night. Then you fast forward to Desert Storm, and the shape of the fight has changed, but the buff's role clicks even cleaner. Coalition opening the skies, the B-52 becomes the aircraft you use when you want weight on demand. And it isn't only about what it drops. Leaflets go out, warning Iraqi forces what's coming, and there are reports that just the expectation of buff strikes helped break people's nerve. By now, the plane doesn't just deliver damage, it delivers pressure. And that pressure leads straight into the pivot, because the battlefield stops paying you for fly closer. Air defenses get sharper and more layered, and the old bomber bargain turns ugly. So the B-52 shifts from being closer to being a provider, the platform that can keep feeding weapons into the fight while staying outside the worst of the threat. The payload evolves with the era, but the job becomes simple. Carry a lot and deliver it when the moment calls. The piece that makes that feel like a modern system is the rotary launcher in the bomb bay. Instead of awkward limits, the buff can release weapons in a controlled sequence, like a magazine that just keeps cycling. So ask yourself, when you can carry that much and dispense it smoothly, what are you looking at? Not a stealthy penetrator, not a one-and-done bomber, a launcher with staying power. And this is where the unsexy details quietly become the difference. Targeting pods let crews find and mark what matters with precision. Fuel management keeps the jet balanced as heavy stores leave the wings, so the aircraft stays stable through the work. None of that makes posters, but it's what makes repeatable strikes feel routine instead of risky. And the whole time, it's still the machine everyone recognizes. 8 engines in 4 pods, a cockpit built around procedures and numbers, not touchscreens. Starts are sequenced, instruments are watched, spoilers, flaps, brakes, drag chute. Because when something this big is moving, you don't get to be casual. That's how the Vietnam buff becomes the Desert Storm buff, and how both of them set up the Arsenal ship buff. It stays relevant for one reason. It can launch loaded, return, reset, and keep delivering on command. So what turns a proven standoff launcher into a hypersonic Arsenal ship? It's not magic. It's a rebuild, done on purpose in the places that actually matter. The Air Force isn't keeping the buff alive because it's iconic. They're keeping it because it's useful, and they're upgrading it to carry the next generation of weapons. Start with the biggest signal of intent, the engines. The old power plants are simply hitting the end of what you can keep maintaining forever, so the Air Force moved forward with a full re-engining plan and picked the Rolls-Royce F-130, a modern turbofan based on a proven commercial family bought in quantity so the fleet has replacements and spares baked in. And yes, there was an idea to drop from 8 engines to 4, but that would have forced a ripple of redesign across systems and flight controls. Too much surgery, too much cost for too little gain. Then you upgrade the eyes and the brain, because a missile carrier is useless if it can't see clearly and plug into the fight. The buff's radar is getting a major step up with AESA tech, better accuracy, better resistance to jamming, and better situational awareness, and it gets even more valuable when the jet isn't operating alone. Those antenna additions and subtle humps are the giveaways. Improved satellite comms and data links that let the aircraft receive updates, take cues, and stay coordinated inside a bigger strike plan while it hauls the heavy load. Now for the part that changes the whole vibe, hypersonics. These missiles aren't small, and they aren't forgiving. You can't bolt them onto yesterday's hardware and pray. That's why one of the most important upgrades isn't flashy at all, it's structural. Stronger external pylons and mounts, built to handle far heavier stores than the older stations were designed for. The logic is simple. If each station can carry more, the bomber can haul the biggest new weapons without awkward constraints. And that matters most over huge distances, think the Pacific, where speed and volume aren't nice-to-haves. They decide whether you get there in time. At that point, the buff starts behaving less like a classic bomber and more like inventory you can move. A big, repositionable magazine that can show up, take a cue, and launch a surge from far enough out to avoid the worst of the defense rings. And this mothership idea isn't new for the B-52. It's been doing weird, ambitious jobs for decades, like carrying NASA's X-15 under the wing. What changes now is scale and purpose. Instead of one experimental aircraft, you're looking at a platform built to carry systems that extend reach, missiles, potentially networked weapons, maybe even future add-ons that let it influence the fight without walking into the danger zone. That's been the B-52's story on repeat. The mission changes, and the airplane gets rearmed for the next era. There's also the nuclear shadow it never completely escapes. The buff started life as a nuclear delivery platform, and modernization keeps it relevant as deterrence evolves. The future force starts to look like a split. Stealth aircraft take the jobs that require going in close, and the B-52 plays the opposite role, delivering mass from distance over and over on demand. If you're the kind of person who thinks smart strategy beats flashy headlines, let us know in the comments below. And if you want more breakdowns, like this, clean, grounded, and built around what the mission actually demands, hit like, subscribe, and stick with us.